So here, let's get into something more applicable for Envirothon. This will be a little more concrete, a little more like what you're going to see. And so this part will help you the most, I think. Let's think about forestry management with a bent in terms of economics and where economics comes in. I like to think of this as, it's kind of like the financial plan is the creamy center of an Oreo cookie. You've got management goals, objectives, and all the management activities that you do. And the creamy stuff in the middle is what makes you want to buy Oreos, right? One thing that we need to think about is forests that grow quickly can be harvested at shorter intervals compared to forests that are slower growing. And management activities can also influence how quickly trees grow. And, that can include site preparation activities, management. And also the other side is management costs. So that could be herbicides, competition between crop trees, managing that, undesirable plants, pesticides to reduce disease, fertilizers, etc. And so when you're thinking about a management plan, you need to account for the differences in tree species, stand quality, and management costs. And what is kind of obvious is that owning a forest is a long-term investment. So we need to do this special kind of accounting that we've been talking about, thinking about this over time, because obviously payments for timber only occur after harvesting occurs at some point in the future. So if we think about our rules for time travel, we need to discount that to bring them back, those potential revenues in the future, bring them back so that we can compare them with other options that we might have today. So as the trees age, they grow bigger, become more valuable, but that value declines when the payout is further in the future, right? So we have these two competing triangles here in this little graph, is that the discounting effect is dragging the value down over time as the harvest becomes further away from you in the future. But the value of that timber at the end, when you do harvest it, is going up as the trees age, up to a certain point, of course. The best way for us to do these comparisons is to estimate the present value of future harvest based on a rotation length. Let's suppose we have a stand of pine trees, and we're in the first year of the life of this stand of pine trees. So what we want to do to start out, to figure out what are my pine trees worth, is calculate the value of our pine tree stand at year 25, at the actual harvest date. So here are some numbers these numbers are a little bit old, but they're based on real values. And these are the benefits that we can expect for our pine stand when the trees are at age 25. So we can get saw timber, chip and saw, and pulpwood out of it. And we know what our yields are going to be. So we have cubic feet per acre. And then we have an estimate of the dollars per cubic feet that we can get for each of those products. So just multiplying those two things together and summing, that can give us the total revenues per acre of about $8,000. But we've got a little problem here, which is that's the value 25 years from now. And it is not money in hand today for me, right? These trees are only in their first year. They're not worth that to me yet. They will be worth that in the future. So the timber benefits can be captured in 24 years in the future. So we need to bring them back and do that through discounting to bring them to a present value. So again, go back to our formula. So our present value of the timber benefits is going to be equal to the future value of the timber divided by 1 plus R to the T. So we just took that straight from our rules for time travel, right? So again, R is the discount rate. The other way to think of that, and this is why we talked about opportunity costs, is the discount rate is also equal to the opportunity cost of the capital that we've invested in our forestry investment. Because we can think of this of, I can sell my land today, including the trees I just planted. I can sell my equipment and put that into the bank. What would that earn me over that 25-year period? It's essentially the comparison of what I could get at the bank versus what I'm foregoing by keeping my operation going, right? So in a lot of timber models, we use 3%, which is a reasonable rate to use. So calculating this out, just put our numbers into this equation. Once you do the maths, you'll see that the present value of our timber benefits is about a little less than $4,000 per acre. Now that gets us to the next step, because it's not costless to manage a timber stand, right? So we've discounted our benefits, but what about costs? And we can do the exact same thing for costs as well, and we actually need to in order to compare things properly. So let's suppose we want to fertilize our stand at 5 years, and it costs us $87 every time we fertilize the stand. So in terms of present value, we just put that back into our calculator, and notice now we're using 5 as our exponent there for T. So it's going to cost us in present value terms $75 per acre. And if we were to fertilize several times, we just let's suppose we're going to fertilize at year 12 and 16. Then we just go to our equation and we just add each of those discounted values that we calculate. So now we're going at 5, we already calculated that one, and then 12, that's the second part of that equation, and then 16. So the present value of all of the costs for fertilization would be $190 per acre.
So this stuff, just to copy Rachel again, this is really powerful stuff to kind of flex and say, oh, put this into your presentation and show people what that you're adjusting this all into present value. It's one of those things that really comes across well.
Here's where things get a little bit tricky, because you say, okay, so we discounted all those costs, and you can say, okay, I've seen this presentation, that makes sense. I'm not going to have to pay that cost until year 5 and then year 12 and 16. So they should be in present value dollars, right? But what about planting costs? Planting costs occur in the first year. So we don't need to discount those costs because they happen now. So let's suppose now we need to calculate what is our net present value going to be. And that's the present value of the benefits minus the present value of the costs. Let's suppose that our planting costs are going to be $376 per acre. Then the net present value of our stand is going to be the present value of the timber benefits minus the present value of the establishment costs, the planting costs, minus the present value of the fertilization costs. So if you sum those two things up, that's 566. So 4,195 minus 566 gives us a net present value of $3,600 per acre. That's basically how you would calculate after all the costs, all of the management costs. This is a simplified version, but this is how you would get the net present value of a timber stand for a simple operation. But that gets us to a little more complicated question. What if we are managing our timber stand for a carbon sequestration program? We can think of all of this stuff in a similar way. It's just a little more complicated, because for a carbon sequestration program, any of the carbon that's sequestered in the woody biomass that's grown over the next 25 years would be considered additional carbon saved, sequestered, and we can receive payment for that. And some payment schemes intend for permanent forests, but some can be harvested. So that's a complication, because then we have to figure out what our time period for when those benefits will be received by us are, and that's going to vary by each program. So you would need to know the details of the program first before you could start your calculations. Also, the amount of carbon that's sequestered varies per year as the trees grow at varying rates over their lifetime. So the value of carbon credits is going to be different each year. So you're going to have to discount each of those carbon credits. If you were receiving annual payments, those values would change over time and you'd have to discount each of those. But then once you know what those payments would be, you would simply add them as their discounted values into our previous calculations. It wouldn't be wildly different, but it could change your decision on when to harvest. So in forest finance, discount rates adjust for risk in the future timberland related cash flows. And one way to do that is changing the discount rate. And again, if you have more questions, please email me. I would be willing to add more and more detail. But the main thing that discounting allows us to do is it allows us to compare the value of alternative options in our management. So let us suppose that we had two options. One was to have a carbon sequestration program, and one was to ignore it. We already calculated the version without a carbon sequestration program. But if we had added the value of those credits in and figured out what the present value of both of those options were, we would be able to look at, in today's dollars, the value per acre of both of those options, and then be able to choose between them. And we can also use these same techniques for other natural resource problems as well. In fact, we should. So we could think about what is the value of a water quality improvement project that's going to take time for improvements to manifest, or soil amendments, and all of that can be done with the same type of discounting that we did here. And here is where I have the shocking reveal that it's a surprise revisit to the Econ Game Zone. So here's what's at stake. It's not $10 this time. You know, there's no better way to be the coolest kid on school campus, right? But you're going to have to answer the challenge question. You can buzz in. Oh, man.
Lightning.
Yeah. I think let's go with Jazzy because, Vivi can only win so many things. All right. Jazzy, you're my person for this challenge question. Let's suppose that instead of valuing a stand of timber, we want to compare different soil amendments that we could put, say, in an irrigated ag field or possibly for our trees. But each soil amendment has different costs over time, and each soil amendment is going to have different impacts on soil quality. So one of these options might produce better soil in the end, but it might have different costs, right? So here's your challenge question. What information do you need to compare those two options? And then what steps do you take once you have your data?
While they're thinking, I will add this is a perfect Envirothon question. I can see this on Logan's tests. I could see this on the forestry test. I could see this being asked in your special topic. So this is a really good question. Even if you're not thinking about it now, come back to this slideshow, come back to the video, and practice it with your team. I really like it. Oh yeah, Jazzy can definitely type it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, when looking at the soil amendments, you would want to look at initial costs, reoccurring costs, and impact on soil quality, and calculate efficiency. Steps to take is collect data, analyze cost benefits, and based on data, make a decision on what to do.
Yeah, I say that's a great answer for me. To the two people who are our winners today, take my email here, send me an email and I will get that to you.
Yeah, we didn't know what to think about the group and what kind of questions. You guys' responses on Poll Everywhere and all of that were just, they're exciting for us. You guys have got some pretty solid ideas about natural resource management. So this is really exciting. Good job.
And thank you to you guys for presenting. You're doing an awesome thing for the program, and I think we'll see our students doing amazing presentations in April.